I'm talking about balance today, specifically with ADHD people, but also like in general. And one of the things I've really noticed in productivity culture, but also just general life, is everyone wants to get back to balance, right? Everybody's like, we got to get balanced and balance between body, mind, and soul. And there's this whole thing, and I am part of that. Like, I just redesigned one of my Substacks to be called The Balanced Seeker because, with ADHD and just in general, we struggle to stay balanced. And part of that is emotional regulation. Part of it is, you know, that we process emotions differently. But one thing I've really noticed in the last year or so is that balance is a myth. No one is ever going to be fully balanced. Trying to be balanced all the time is a fool's errand. So, the best metaphor I can think of is instead of being a scale, like trying to balance, you want to be a pendulum. So, I'll show you this is a divination pendulum, but so you notice it could swing back and forth as opposed to trying to stay on one side or the other, which is pretty impossible. So, one of the things that I like to do to seek this, movement is realize think of it as a metaphor. If you're going on a trip, you're not going to get to a rest stop and stay there, right? You're going to keep moving. And the same with ADHD and people in general. We need to stop trying to reach this mythical balance state and start being cool with swinging between the extremes. So, extremes are often thought of as a bad thing. And, for me, I always thought it was a bad thing. But extremes are actually good in a way because that's where we can hyper focus, that's where we can experience the full range of emotions. And once you get more accustomed to moving instead of just trying to balance, that's where the magic's going to happen. That's where you're going to see more progress. So I'm just looking at my little thing here. Um, we also need to keep in mind it's important to be accountable. So a lot of times we tend to let ourselves off the hook and say we're not going to do certain things because, I need to rest or whatever. And that's important to know the difference between do I really need this or is this something I'm doing to let myself off the hook? And for me, sometimes rest is avoidance, sometimes it's perfectionism. A lot of us tend to be very perfectionistic and feel like we need to know exactly what we're doing. And just pulling back can be sort of a fear response. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing we want to do is learn to check in with ourselves. So many of us have this, inability or inability, I should say, to check in. And what we want to do is develop a practice of seeing the signs of when we're too far in one direction or the other. So I have a little bit on my screen here. Signs of super hyper focus is ignoring sleep and hunger and pain, ignoring your body's cues, dropping communication, and productivity is like a compulsive thing. Signs of shutdown, you're avoiding starting anything. You're feeling really low and flat. You call it rest. You want to feel motivated. And then signs of emotional intensity, like that feeling of sort of manic, like overdoing it basically, that we sometimes get locked into. Small things can feel overwhelming. Ruminating on rejection, right? We all tend to, when we're overly emotional, we blow a tiny thing out of proportion and we can't calm ourselves down. So those are some ways we could see what the strategy is, and there's different things we can do for each. So I'm going to pull a card for each, an oracle card. I'm using my Quiet Rebel Oracle by Lynn Thurman, which I like, as I am sure everyone knows because I use it a lot. Okay. So what's a good way to deal with the hyperfocus? Fork in the road, crossroads. So realizing that you're always going to have other choices, right? You don't have to stay in one place. You don't have to be, totally, even if you're hyper focusing, this is telling you that there are other things you can do. And You don't have to be, like, totally devoted to that. Um, and this to me also means realizing we have the choice of how we, manage our emotions, how we can pay attention to our balance needs. And again, we're not trying to stay in balance, but we're trying to not hang out in the extremes for too long. So this is saying there's always choices that we can make, right? Let's try another one for another way we can stop worrying so much about balance. Let's do Secret Garden, solitude. So, one of the things we tend to do is think solitude is a bad thing. We try to push ourselves out there. This card is saying solitude is somehow the best way to get in touch with yourself and your balance needs. So, it's a good way to see, where am I at? Am I overstimulated? Am I hyperfocusing? Am I pushing myself too hard? Am I avoiding stuff? You only can do that if you focus on solitude. Let's pull another card. How we can keep that movement going. Oh, that's weird. It's devil. Double side. Okay. Here's the one next to it. Unlearning. So that's a big thing, right? We tend to be absorbed in this productivity culture mindset that we always have to be on, or that we should be, somehow more balanced than we are, that we shouldn't be extreme. And most people have their moments of being extreme, right? Being extreme is not a thing exclusive to neurodivergence. It's just easier for us to get into because we don't have the same safeguards. So this card is saying we need to unlearn that shame around our feelings of being extreme. We need to start being cool with not necessarily being balanced 100%, but allowing ourselves to move between these states. So your zone is not going to be that you can't be balanced. It's that you get stuck on one side or the other. You want to keep moving through these cycles. Let's pull another one just for the heck of it. Face your demons, courage. So, what that means to me for in this context is we need to be okay with acknowledging when we're in a difficult state, not necessarily feeling bad about it, but saying, okay, how can I get out of this? What are some practical steps I could take? And having the courage to not be hung up on always being balanced. And a lot of us have this like neurotypical view of we should always be like even keel and sunny and nothing should get us down. But that's not life. That's not life for anyone. This card is saying you want to be courageous in looking at what state you're in and how you can solve it, right? Let's do one last one. If anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat and happy to answer them. And I am gonna be putting a post on the Balance Seeker about this, incidentally, ironically, maybe. Okay. This one's funny. Middle finger of defiance or of love, loving defiance. So this is me saying, or the card's saying, you gotta be okay with saying, I'm not gonna live up to expectations. I'm not going to constantly be worried about being in the middle. I'm not gonna be constantly worried about not being balanced. I'm not gonna be worried about what people think of me. Because again, everyone is going through something. Everyone has their own struggles with balance. No one is 100% balanced all the time. That's a myth. No matter what drugs you're on, no matter what you're doing, you can never be 100% balanced. And actually, being sort of defiant and extreme is sometimes how you get stuff done, right? All the inventors, all these great artists and creators have all had moments of intensity and emotion and extremity. No one creates stuff from a middle space. It's always something, one or the other, that pushes them there. So, this is saying to me, we got to be cool with defying expectations of ourselves and others. And we got to be okay with not being 100% balanced. Balance is a myth. Balance is something that people try to, put themselves in a box. You really shouldn't be balanced. You should be swinging from point to point, not staying too long in any one spot, but making sure that, whatever movements you take are in alignment with what you want for your life. So, that was my spiel on balance. I've been thinking a lot about it because we grow up and we're told all this stuff about you want to seek balance and you need to have moderation. And for those of us with ADHD, that feels impossible a lot of the time. So then we get this added layer of shame. And, what these cards are telling me is, we got to learn to unlearn that. We have to learn to be okay with that swing. Again, we're not staying in one place, we're swinging from point to point. The trick is to keep our movement going so that we don't get jammed into any one position for too long. Because, if you're hyperfixating and you're overworking, you're going to burn yourself out. If you're too emotional, for too long, you're not moderating yourself, you're going to hurt yourself and burn out. And all of this stuff is contingent upon like knowing your signals, right? Learning to develop some self-awareness and seeing like your little moments. So for me, I realize that I'm overstimulated when I want to start eating more because that to me is like, okay, this is a way to slow things down. So then when I notice that I feel like eating stuff that maybe I shouldn't be, whether it's chocolate or, going and getting a bunch of lattes and drinking them, I think this is actually me being overstimulated and me being too in one extreme. How am I going to move that? So usually it's doing the opposite of whatever I'm doing. It's going and, decompressing or going and doing some movement to get some of that energy out. So we got to figure out ways to work with this stuff, right? We're not going to be okay with just being on one extreme or the other. We got to learn how to move with it. So if anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat. If not, I'm going to take off and post this on the ADHD Tarot later. I'm also writing a piece. Actually, I wrote a piece already for Medium that I'm going to be putting on the Balance Seeker later too. So I think there's a lot we miss about balance in ADHD and in general in life. Balance is not something that is 100% attainable at any time for anyone. So I think we got to be honest about that. And if no one has any questions, I'm going to take off. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday and take care.